So the phone erupts at 11. Andrew was smiling, speaking fondly of the night before. Interrupting my quiet night at home. Just a man and his Californication Season 3.
I don't even own a television. Condominium.
1, 2, 3, there are books that are good, there are books that are bad. There's some books so fucking awful you wish you never had read them at all. Cause a novel can ruin your life. Hey buddy, I don't even own a television.
Hello, welcome to I Don't Even Own a Television. It's a podcast about bad books. I'm J.W. Friedman.
And I'm Chris Collision.
And we are here to talk about a book called Condominium by...
Daniel Falatko.
Awesome. Condominium by Daniel Falatko. So this book, you may have not heard of it before. I guess...
wish we hadn't heard of it before.
Yeah. Well, let's tell people how this came into our lives if you want to go ahead and lead it off.
Sure. So I actually might have been the first one to see it because somebody just retweeted into my personal Twitter feed, I think I've found the worst book ever. And they did it with a picture of the back cover. And the back cover of this book is extraordinary. I kind of laughed because the back cover didn't actually look that bad. So I just sort of said, haha, that looks like a cool breeze. Then people started suggesting we do it.
Yeah, and so it's worth mentioning this is a book that's available free online. So if you're the type of person that likes to read along at home, I suggest you stop the podcast and torture yourself for the 4 or 5 hours it'll take to finish this.
Yep, a few people did. We'll be hearing from them a little later.
Yeah, but yeah, we figured this is fair game because it's in a store. You know, this thing exists in the real world. Exactly. It's not fanfiction.net, so we're cool.
Yeah, it's not, straight self-published. It was something that was advertised. That's how it came across our faces. So we're not punching down.
If you wonder why we're being so preemptively defensive, it's because this book is bad, and we're probably going to tear it apart. So, yeah, I guess before we go any further, plot in 60 seconds time.
Whew, this is it, my time to shine.
Here's a song.
Nobody knows if you finish or not. You've got 60 seconds to give them a plot. Plot in 60 seconds.
Okay, plot in 60 seconds. Collision is going to have 60 seconds to attempt to summarize this book, which may be harder than usual.
But definitely harder than usual, and especially if you understand that this book is a trim 160-some pages.
Yeah. So. Let's start the clock now.
Late 20s New York couple Charles and Sarah buy a condo for $980,000 and aren't immediately sure it's for them. Charles has a big report due in a couple days. Oh no, I hope he gets it done. Charles is an ex-frat boy spreadsheet jockey, a real profit and loss man who works in a cube and worships a grunge rocker who's been dead for a decade. And also, he likes to snort heroin, so we really give a shit about what happens to Charles. Sarah is a perma-stoned hippie chick who freaks out about the condo instantly, decides she and Charles need to do heroin together, which they've never done, on a Tuesday night before Charles's report is due. She asks him for a baby on heroin and then promptly gets laid off. Charles fucks around and crushes on every woman he sees, gets his report in with zero drama, and thinks he's going to lose the condo, but doesn't. They nearly break up, but they don't. Charles's hip drug friends quit drugs and reaffirm their love. Everything ends with a big, happy coke party! / orgy! Yay!
All right, cool, we're good. So that made no sense at all.
It's true. There's very little plot in this book. It's basically just sitting with a couple of unpleasant people and their idiot friends for hundreds of pages.
So we should definitely talk about the back cover blurb now. So
let's do it.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. So here's how this book self-describes. Charles and Sarah are a typical New York creative class couple. He's in finance. She works at a hipster small press. Yet both are indie rock East Village veterans who aren't above snorting a little heroin on the weekends. But when they decide to take the logical next step and buy a condo in one of the glass and steel skyscrapers now dotting the waterfront of Williamsburg, their lives start to fall apart almost the moment after they sign their mortgage. And this is to say nothing of their creepy neighbors, their possibly haunted apartment, job crises in both their industries, and former friends still in Manhattan who are determined to pull them back into the debauchery. A touching ode to the a-holes ruining Brooklyn, the literary debut of, quote, the millennial John Updike, unquote, is a funny yet wistful dramedy about young urban life during the Great Recession. And you do not need to be a New Yorker yourself to enjoy his smart insights about city living and growing older, ... although that certainly doesn't hurt.
Oh, well, it's good to know that you don't have to live in a specific city to enjoy this book. I don't know. The millennial John Updike is the thing that made me groan out loud for sure.
Absolutely. Especially because it's quoted but not attributed to anybody.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, the millennial John Updike, my mom.
Yeah, like, what does it say that on the fucking t-shirt you got at the mall? Like,
yeah, he went down to the pier and got an airbrush t-shirt that says Millennium John Updike in bubble letters.
Yeah, exactly. This guy is described in the end of the book as a graduate of the MFA in Writing program, and he lives and works in New York City, and this is his first published novel. There's a picture of him where he's leaning up against a graffiti, covered bodega gate thing, looking incredibly smug and plaid.
Yeah.
And I say that as a man literally looking smug and plaid right now.
I was going to say, there's a lot of plaid happening in this room right now. You better watch what you say. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what the book aspires to be, definitely Updike. As you mentioned earlier, before we started recording, and I think we need to talk about this, the shadow of Don DeLillo looms large over this book, and not in a pleasant way.
No.
This really feels like someone who wanted to write, quote-unquote, their white noise. And, I mean, right down to the fact that the characters are essentially unlikable, but you're supposed to kind of relate to them because they're very much a product of their times. They're put in this position where that's what they are. So their unlikability is presented as sympathetic in a lot of the same ways that I felt defined White Noise, especially Babette, the wife character in White Noise, I think has tons in common with Sarah here.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's my heavy-handed literary criticism of this, but I think it's worth mentioning because it's a very obvious, I don't want to say rip-off in a lot of ways, but homage, maybe?
I mean, there's this thing that DeLillo does to young novelists, and it's horrible. Like, DeLillo has this incredibly weird, stylized dialogue that looks really fun to write if you're somebody who likes to write, but you're not going to do it as well. The dialogue in this literally reads like DeLillo trying to write sitcom snappy patter after a stroke. It's absurdly bad. DeLillo also has these other weird little tics that look really fun and appropriatable, like funny made-up names for drugs, funny band names, funny brand names.
Yeah.
But the thing is, DeLillo is smart and good at writing, and you are not. So if you spend your evening thinking of really funny band names, come back to it in the morning and try to read that again and see if it's actually clever. And then sit down with yourself for a couple of days and think if clever is really the virtue that you most want to embody.
Yeah. I think, it's probably good to give some examples of this. So I think in this situation, Cyanide Breakfast would be a great example.
So we can get into that. My What Is Your Fave was definitely going to be What Is Your Fave awful fake band name.
Oh, that's very similar to something I was thinking of. Yeah. But, I mean, the position that Cyanide Breakfast occupies in the narrative essentially is that they're the product of, not the product of, but the subject of our main character Charles's his obsession. They were a band he loved as a teenager. The singer killed himself. They're very obviously a Nirvana stand-in, except Nirvana exists in this world too, which is strange.
It is. I was going to actually ask you that. What do you think this band really sounds like? Because Nirvana is obviously the model, but as things kept going on, like Charles is a frat boy. Like he wears a white baseball cap backwards. He wears, cargo shorts. And so after a while, I started making up new bands for them to sound like just to keep myself occupied.
Yeah.
I started with Alice in Chains.
Uh-huh.
I think there's definitely some yarling going on.
There is, for sure.
Right? But then there's this section at the end with this long lyrics quote. And I swear to God, I think you could sing it to Steal Your Sunshine by Lynn.
See, I was thinking, and we're getting a little off the rails here, and I want to bring it back after this, but I was definitely thinking like Vertical Horizon, Collective Soul. That kind of vaguely spiritual yarling.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they mentioned a couple song titles of theirs, and they're all like just this corny, like kind of pseudo-hippie BS, like I forget, like something like Sunrise of Love and shit like that. So it's a little hard to take seriously. But the position of Cyanide Breakfast within the narrative is very much like the story takes place over the course of a week, and both of the characters' mental health is kind of on the decline.
Right.
And so cyanide breakfast becomes more and more talismanic as Homeboy himself is getting more into heroin and letting, more of his life slip. He becomes more obsessed with this band from his past because the anniversary of the death of the singer is approaching.
So, apparently every year he does this on the anniversary where he stays up all night constructing an elaborate shrine full of pictures cut out of magazines and all his tapes and demo CDs and burned CDs and obscurities laid out shrinely, and he sits cross-legged in the corner with his headphones on listening to it.
Yeah. It would be weird for a 15-year-old. For a grown man, it's a little hard to fathom. And you call it a shrine. I would call it a murder board because there's definitely descriptions of newspaper articles connected with yarn and stuff to steal a phrase from another podcast I love, it's evidence dungeon shit.
Exactly, but it is not said that he cut the eyes out, and that's how you can tell that these pictures have been cut out for the purpose of either sex crime or murder.
That's true.
That you cut the eyes out.
Yeah, that's definitely. That was omitted.
Maybe that'll be in the sequel.
Yeah. Well, that's something else I want to talk about with this book here is that I feel like throughout the book there's a pervasive sense of menace. Once again, Don DeLillo, right? There's this pervasive sense of kind of background menace. It's never really explained. You think that it's building to something which in White Noise is the airborne toxic event.
Right.
This book has no airborne toxic event, but there is still this feeling that something huge is going to happen that builds throughout the book, and nothing happens.
Nothing happens. As I mentioned, it literally ends with a very happy drug-fueled orgy. The problem with the sense of menace is that it's expressed mostly by Charles, our protagonist, who is repeatedly described as handsome, just being afraid of random shit. He's afraid of everything. He's afraid of heights. He won't go on the balcony. He's afraid of electrical failure several different times in the novel out of nowhere. He meets somebody for lunch and he's like, what if that aquarium broke and we got electrocuted?
Yeah.
It just comes completely out of nowhere. And Sarah has a couple of good fear-based breakdowns that I actually kind of liked.
Yeah.
There's one where she's strung out, staggering around the apartment, and the shadows are all weird, and she's freaked out. That was one of the better scenes in the book.
I agree, but I would also
say... But you're right,
say...
it doesn't go anywhere.
I would also say that while that scene was one of the best scenes in the book, it's almost immediately called back to in one of the corniest ways possible, and I hate to bring this up so quickly to having mentioned it on a previous podcast, but there is a chapter in this book that's basically House of Leaves, where suddenly they're convinced the walls are moving and this non-utility beam, a non-structural beam, is moving and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But they're on junk, so, it's dismissed. But, almost immediately all that cool kind of menace that was built up in the scene prior with her actual, weird heroin-fueled hallucinations and freak out and stuff is made silly as both of the characters begin to see walls moving and beams shifting and stuff. And I guess that's what the back blurb referred to as their possibly haunted house, but that's the only time in the book where anything remotely approaching that sort of thing happens.
Yeah, and only because I read the back first, because that's what was put in front of me on Twitter and on Facebook, I kept looking for evidence of haunting in various places. And so for a long time, I was convinced that Raymond, who's this creepy neighbor figure who has kind of a Bartleby the Scrivener vibe about him, where he's just kind of vaguely sinister and unearthly despite only ever doing relentlessly mundane things. I kind of thought he was going to turn out to be some kind of ghost.
Yeah, or something.
Spoiler, he's not. He's just an old man with a dumb job that doesn't bear going into right now, who ends up having a crush on Sarah and getting easily diverted onto Charles's crush at the coke-fueled orgy.
That is true. But let's put a pin in that. I want to talk more about Raymond later.
Okay.
But I guess let's do some high points, low points. We'll try to keep it short because we should go to break after that. So
I think that sounds good.
Let's start out with one of your high points.
That's a little bit tricky. I'll start with my global high point. You kind of mentioned DeLillo. You mentioned that this book is sort of attempting to be a portrait of characters in a time and place who only make sense in that time and place. I'm sympathetic to that project in general. There are some well-executed scenes, and some of those moments kind of ring true. There's a moment where she's like, "What happened to all your friends?" And I thought, oh, that's an interesting conversation that I haven't seen in a ton of novels before. So there are glimmers here of a half-decent short story trying to get out of this 160-page novelette.
Pardon me. Beer.
Beer's delicious.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree. I think for me, my first high point here, and I think this is going to be pretty obvious to people that know me, is that this book was loaded with musical references. A lot of them miss, but there were a couple occasions where I was just really like, oh, that's charming. Like at one point, the character Raymond, they're describing him to each other, and they're having one of these Alan Sorkin-esque witty back and forths that are peppered throughout the book. And Charles says, "It's a shame about Ray," and that made me go, fuck yeah. Which I hated myself for, but we'll get to that. That
was one of my groaners, but okay.
Yeah, okay,
I'll give you.
We'll get to that.
But you're right. Some of them do hit. We don't have to agree on which ones hit and which ones miss, but some of them definitely hit.
Yeah, but low point.
Okay, so my biggest low point would be the writing.
Yeah,
it's not lazy, but it's extremely bad. It's overwritten and it's phony everywhere. I've already kind of talked about the bad Don DeLillo dialogue, but just the narration, even outside the dialogue, alternates between sentence fragments and really horrifyingly bad run-ons. One of our listeners threw one example and was like, "There's only 4 commas in this one," which I thought was a lot of fun that he pointed that out, and just like a real chore to read.
Yeah. Okay. So for me, I guess my first low point is pretty much the same thing as my previous high point, which is the musical references. Which, as much as I enjoyed it, it made me realize very early on that this is very much trying to pull a Ready Player One on me, where it's a book written specifically for people my age, and it does get into kind of, here's some bands you will recognize, here's some things you will know are song lyrics, like things like that. And while that was a little charming to me at first, I think when wielded by a slightly better author, it would be a lot more effective, because after the third or fourth time I recognized one of those little like elbow in the rib kind of wink and nudge references, I started to feel really pandered to. And I think most people would agree that feeling pandered to is not a good way to feel when you're reading a book.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me to my low point, which was that the execution of what I called this book's project is just so inept.
Yes.
Right? So you talk about these references, but the references are usually not good ones. Like there's this running gag where every time they get on the elevator, a new person they've never seen shows up in a rock t-shirt. And you're always told what rock t-shirt it is. And it, like, at one point it's a Jay Giles t-shirt. And even when Jay Giles was touring, they weren't selling any t-shirts.
See, I grew up in Florida. I'm going to argue with there. I've seen tons of Jay Giles shirts.
All right, fair enough. But, and there's the Office gag at one point. It's Toto Tuesday.
Oh,
and everybody's singing Toto. And so just, the fact is, if you're going to do a zeitgeist novel like this, you've got to get the details right.
That's true.
And I don't think that this author has any command of the details or the culture he's trying to depict at all.
There was a Diablo Cody-ish feel to a lot of the way that cultural signifiers were employed, regardless of maybe their lack of common cultural relevance nowadays. I think it's worth mentioning definitely that Sarah is a Rolling Stones fanatic throughout this book, which is believable. I mean, there are plenty of people of all ages who like the Rolling Stones, but like it's played definitely as a point that's supposed to be very defining of her character. She compares everybody to Keith or Mick in her mind, and it becomes very obviously like a quote-unquote quirk instead of a character trait, and it's fucking obnoxious.
And it's really her only character trait. One thing I want to know...
She's stoned.
Well, yeah, okay, you're right. She's stoned. And she's... Boy, the author takes a lot of pleasure describing her wearing super short shorts around the house.
That's true, yeah.
That recurs way too often. But I want to make one note about, this guy not commanding the details that he's trying to deploy. She's described as quirky in part because she's a Stones fan, but in particular because she is obsessed with 70s Rolling Stones, as though this is their obscure era. In the 70s, the Rolling Stones were so big that Jimmy Page, in Led Zeppelin, the biggest band in the world at the time, was rumored to be ready to quit the band and join the Rolling Stones as their lead guitar player. Right? They had transcended their own industry at that point.
Yeah.
This was not their obscure period, for fuck's sake.
Well, I think just once again, being unable to nail the details, I think this is a good example of it. This is just a random passage from the book that I had highlighted. And remember, this is supposed to take place in modern times, ostensibly.
No, this is like, we'll
talk about that after break, but
yeah,
modern times, definitely. The three of them moved to the balcony to smoke the rest of what Sarah had. The night was oppressive and muggy, mist over the narrow streets. Someone somewhere shouted, "Gary Glitter was framed!" Like, come the fuck on, man. It's so clumsily deployed.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense in the context of the book. And I think kind of building what you were saying earlier about the project of this.
Yeah.
If your project is to present people who are 100% of their time and sympathetic because of those circumstances, you can't fuck up the circumstances. You can't fuck up the world details.
Yep.
Because it makes these people feel more like a Portlandia sketch than actual human beings.
Especially because, like, this book doesn't really know if it's a satire or not. It's got that weird tonal ambiguity that DeLillo often has. But what it definitely thinks it is edgy.
Yeah.
But it is so edgeless. It's like this clumsy, slow NPR edgy, or like Pitchfork edgy, or I don't know, blank that's not edgy at all.
It's
edgy.
exactly as edgy as like a Slate.com editorial about how millennials are lazy.
Yes. Perfect. This is Slate edgy.
Yeah. I think we need one more high point each before we go. So
I actually have a high point.
Awesome. What's that?
There were a handful of jokes that I actually really liked in this book. At one point, somebody snarks at another in a bar, "Your stepdad must be so proud." I don't know why that made me laugh.
That was pretty great, yeah.
There's a description where two people had met on a charity walk for found object sculptors suffering from depression. I thought that was funny. So there were a couple of moments where I actually really liked what was happening.
Man, I'm going to have to chintz out on my high point because I just did not like this book. So I guess my final high point is that it was short. I could read this all in the course of a 6-pack. So, yeah. And it fucking required it for sure.
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and take a break. We come back, we'll get more in detail about some of these things that we've tabled. So we'll be back.
My portfolio dead, call me the pretty dick trickster kid. Had to shred the documents in a skip. I shop with strange kids with flip-flops and sick duvet. Sick of flipping off watch and brulee. When the caramel cramp kid bid for top choice in the front row of the Sotheby's auction all day. Pump a fist with a Tiffany egg on both wrists. It's blitz out of the country club, roses and clip. Schooners in the summer get racy, can't chase me. Internet the moment, a Brooklyn Bam donor. Walking through the halls of IKEA, skied out. Shiny from the roof of a body shopped out. Enter the set sparkling, catalog out. Tennis shirt and casual.
All right, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. We're discussing Condominium. In the last segment, we kind of flew over things at a high level, and I think talked about a lot of the problems we have with this book. There were a couple things that we had kind of pegged to talk about later, and we should get into them now. The first is the character Raymond, who I think both of us seem to have a certain fondness for, I think.
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
See, after his second or third opinion, my comment that I wrote in the book was, in a better book, Raymond could be cool.
I don't disagree with that. This book kind of reads like it's about the back characters of some kind of updated Great Gatsby or something. Yeah. And it's odd that the background characters of that book are then more interesting than the foreground characters. Mm-hmm. Like, I would much rather have read a book about Andrew and Ruthie than about Charles and Sarah, for example.
Andrew and Ruthie are their junkie friends.
Yeah.
So Raymond in this book basically is their creepy neighbor who they move in the first day after they move in when one of them gets drunk I don't even remember what happens. They cause some kind of disturbance. Raymond's right there at the door like, hey, you guys are being loud.
Right.
And then it kind of builds to the point where he's asking them like, so you slept on the balcony last night? And you start to get these real creepy vibes that he's like spying on them all the time.
And he's always there. He's always in the hallway. He's always downstairs when they come in or go out. So he's a spectral, always present figure.
He is, and I also think it's worth mentioning, though, and this is one of the huge downfalls of the character, I feel like, is that he's really one of the first attempts that they have to interject just straight up satire into the story, and that he's obsessed with what articles appear on Curbed and other various real estate websites.
Right.
In a way that's supposed to be played as comical. Like, he's very neurotic about the smoking area and people not using the designated extinguishing area, and what if people write about this on Curbed or bkhipzone.com or something. And yeah.
And like his first line or something might be, do you have any active social media accounts? Like, I remember writing that down as a good example of terrible dialogue that's supposed to be funny stilted, but just comes across like bad stilted.
Well, it's also worth noting, too, that, like, I mean, while Raymond is presented as weaselly and kind of like not a good character in any way, our heroes, ostensibly, their interactions with him, they're really fucking shitty. Their first meeting is when Sarah meets Raymond in the hallway, and she concludes their meeting by saying, great, well, it's been nice meeting you, neighbor. I'll stop by sometime for a cup of flour or whatever the fuck.
And I think we're supposed to be charmed because she's supposedly kind of... I was really unsure what her thing was supposed to be. I know she likes the Stones. I know she likes to get stoned. But I kind of had her pegged as this indier-than-thou character throughout. But when one of the characters later establishes that she's a hippie, I was like, okay, I guess that's what she's supposed to be. But she's definitely supposed to be somebody who doesn't have like a lot of patience for your social mores, man.
Yeah, but it's so irritatingly done.
Yeah.
Like, the way that it's presented makes her just come off like an asshole. And the same thing is true of Charles. Pretty much in all of their interactions with anyone who isn't one of their, specifically drawn to be cool circle of friends, they're just like super dismissive and shitty to everybody.
Yeah. And the one time that actually really works is when she finally meets a couple of her coworkers outside work and realizes, oh, I don't like these people. That was one of those few scenes that really rang true, because I've definitely had that moment where you're like, oh shit, this guy is way less funny and acerbic in my kitchen than he is in the break room at work. Now he's just rude.
This book has another huge problem, which is something we talked a little bit off the air, and I know, Collision, you had a lot of opinions about this, and that there's a weird time disconnect here that I think needs to be addressed, because once again, so much of this book is about being of its time that there are things that kind of stand out as glaringly wrong.
Right. I am 100% convinced that at least the first 2/3 of this book were written in 2005 and not revised, and that about the last third got either written much later or actually a revision pass. So this high finance guy who's got explicitly enough money to make at least a serious dent in a $180,000 down payment out of his savings is described as having a BlackBerry in what is supposed to be 2015. I had a BlackBerry in 2015, and I know that detail is wrong. There's a number of jokes about people with Strokes haircuts. There's a description of a band. What is this band that's playing? Oh, they're just, boys with funny bangs playing Joy Division bass lines like every other band.
Yeah, every other band win. That's what Interpol, chick. Like, I don't know. That's not what's happening now.
Exactly.
I'm old and I know that.
Exactly. There's a bunch of those. And it just reads very lazy and very out of touch, when the whole point is it's supposed to be, razor sharp and describing hip kids. Yeah,
that's very true, I think. There's a band that another fake band that features pretty heavily in the plot named Alligator Union, I think that's their name.
Alligator Uprising.
Alligator Uprising, yeah. And they're very much described as kind of being Strokesy, too. Their singer's name is Micah and has an afro. That's mentioned. So, But yeah, so they appear a lot throughout the book, and it's once again, like whenever they're described, it feels very out of place, and very not of its time. But then there are weird things like this plugged into it, which almost feel like it was later punched up in an effort to make it a little more modern, and it comes across as even more awkward. Like here's an excerpt. AU is a great band and all, but dubstep will take out anything with a guitar by the close of the year.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's dialogue, by the way.
That's straight dialogue. And then the next line is even worse, which is something about like, but dubstep can never convey love.
It can't conquer love.
Can't conquer love. Jesus fucking
dubstep
Christ.
can't conquer love.
Yeah, and then in the last or second to last chapter, like page like 131, we actually get a couple of modern references. Pussy Riot gets deployed as a reference. Yeah. So at least that we know was either written or, like you say, punched up in the last couple of years.
I think he took an update pass at this book before it went to publishing.
I think he took an update pass at the last third. I will ride and die with that. Especially early in the book, they're constantly going to bars and hearing songs on the jukebox and sort of like describing them in this phony arch way about, and then I was listening to some girl sing about a unicorn. It's like, you're not afraid to name names. If you don't like Taylor Swift, say it's fucking Taylor Swift. If you think it's a shitty song by Jet, say you think it's a shitty song by Jet. Like, don't pussyfoot around. But every time they do that, it's minimum 8 to 10 years ago. The reference is.
No, that sounds about right. Yeah, there's also, I don't want to spoil my dramatic reading, but I think my dramatic reading factors pretty heavily into this. So I'll make sure to remind you all of that at home before we get into that.
Fair enough. You know, another thing I thought that would be worth talking about that we haven't really talked about is the complete ineptitude of the presentation of this book. I said this a number of times in the Facebook thread that was spawned by asking people to read along with us, but the back page, which we read, the back cover, which we read, is easily the most professionally executed thing about this. There are typos all over. There are constant word errors, and they're homonym errors. They're exactly the kinds of word and grammar errors that running spell check doesn't catch.
There are also 3 points of this book that I noted when the characters that are speaking change.
Yes.
Where it will be Charles speaking, and then it says Patrick said, when Patrick isn't even involved in the conversation. Like, literally the author is getting the names of his characters mixed up as he's writing, and that doesn't bode well.
Exactly. Or clipping scenes out or mashing scenes together. There's at least 2 instances where somebody realizes something that they were explicitly described as knowing 2 pages before.
Yeah.
So, it's incredibly sloppily done and sloppily presented, and it's incredibly frustrating to be reading a book that, yes, okay, fine, we didn't have to pay for it because the PDFs were given away as an effort to increase readership, but you can pay $8.99 for this book that is only 160 some pages long and written by a guy who does not know the difference between discrete and discrete, who does not know the difference between dual and dual.
And it's worth noting, once again, this is not self-published. Like, there was the opportunity for somebody to edit this, and I guess it just fell through the cracks, but it's the kind of mistakes that are really frustrating to read, and they really yank you out of the story, for sure.
Absolutely. As do details. Let's jump back to time for a second.
Yeah.
I was making jokes to myself about, wow, what's next for this incredibly dated picture of 2015? Is he going to make a white-belted hipster joke? And then fucking bam, page 102. A guy is described as actually factually wearing a white leather belt.
Yep. Like, do you think fixed gear bikes will be mentioned in this book? Fixed gear bikes are mentioned in this book.
There was one description of somebody with an iPad case mounted on the outside of their
backpack.
messenger bag.
It's not just one, it's a couple with matching iPad cases.
I don't know how that works.
I don't either. It sounds like a good way to wreck your iPad.
And I spend like literally 40% of my workday on bag sites.
Yeah.
It's a little glimpse into Collision's professional program.
I actually have a subscription with a website called bagsunlimited.com, but they just sell like the vinyl sleeves that you put records in and stuff. But all they sell is various bags. It's pretty awesome. In bulk. And you can put them in the bag hutch.
What is your fave? record mentioned in this book to put... No, we won't get into games yet.
Yeah, no, not yet. Oh, man. So much stones in this book, by the way. We mentioned that earlier, but I mean, it's the laziest characterization, and it's almost to the point where the character of Sarah feels like a Saturday Night Live sketch almost. Everything that happens, she compares to a Rolling Stones song or a point in a Rolling Stones movie or biopic or biography, and it's just really off-putting.
The worst line of dialogue in this book might be after she's come home, found that Charles, who came home from work early, puttered around for 5 minutes and then went to the bar. This is portrayed, her discovery of this is portrayed as she thinks she's been burgled. The place is, this catastrophe, right? Mm-hmm. When she catches up with him, she says, "What did you do in the apartment? It looked like a crossfire hurricane went through the place."
Jesus Christ.
So
I didn't even notice that at the time, but that's so horrible.
That was one of the moments where I put the computer down and went for a nice trip to the fridge to get 2 more beers to shotgun, which is the state one needs to be in to approach this book at all.
For our younger readers, Crossfire Hurricane is a lyric from the Rolling Stones song Jumpin' Jack Flash.
Thanks, fact guy.
No problem.
Never heard you on the show before.
I just want to make sure these jokes land.
Yeah, thank you very much. I should also know one thing about this book. It took seriously more than half an hour for me to get through the first 3 pages because they are so incredibly bad. Some readers pointed some stuff out from those early pages that maybe we should talk about. So the first actual sentence with like a noun, a verb, and an object is somewhere buried in the second paragraph. The entire first paragraph is sentence fragments about boxes.
Yeah.
Those were some cardboard characters I was actually interested in.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
But I want to note that that's not just a joke. These boxes have backstory, and the backstory is explained to us. Numerous tchotchkes in their apartment have backstory, and this backstory is painstakingly explained to us every time.
More than most human beings in this book.
Far more than any human being in this book. It's worth noting that I don't think Charles and Sarah have a last name.
No, they don't. Nobody in this book has a last name.
So they're like the people who write into our show. Anyway, sorry. So Sarah's first line, she's complaining about the movers who just kind of, I guess, bailed on them. Mm. And she's like, "I'd leave them a bad Yelp review, but that would be too drastic."
Yeah.
And like literally no one who actually leaves Yelp reviews thinks a bad Yelp review is drastic.
Yeah,
right? It's the exact wrong word.
It was, well, if you're trying to get me to hate these characters, that's a great way to start off. To have them be like avid Yelpers that are,
True.
Like writing bad reviews of their fucking moving service or whatever. That definitely seems like someone I do not like.
Yeah.
So I spent about the first 2 chapters of this book trying to figure out whether I was supposed to be sympathetic to them or not.
I spent the whole book kind of wondering that.
Yeah.
I don't think the book knows, and I think that's a big problem. I don't think it's a problem to be ambiguous about whether or not the characters are good or bad or likable or unlikable. That's actually, in fact, interesting and good for a book to do. But the book doesn't know what it thinks of its own characters.
I think that's a really, really good way to describe it. Like, it almost feels like it's written by somebody who maybe has things in common with these characters and feels some amount of guilt about it. And that really kind of comes through, I think, in the portrayal of these fundamentally unlikable people that you're kind of supposed to like, but you're not sure why.
Well, and even on that second page, the first thing that happens is the way they start talking about the movers is obviously supposed to be edgy. Louisa pointed this out to us, one of our listeners. And they're insulting them in this really classist way. Like, "I'd leave them a bad Yelp review, but I suppose their kids need their child support. Ha ha. Divorce and working for a living and paying child support is hilarious."
It's actually funny you mentioned the word edgy because that's literally the first note in my notes. It's just the word edgy. And
right.
It was the paragraph or the passage you just mentioned, the child support joke.
Yeah.
So,
it's a guy who's trying to be edgy, but he's trying to be edgy based on having heard a frat boy sing along with a Strokes song, and he tries to imagine the backstory to it. And he found out that like Interpol had a song called "There's No I in Threesome." So he just sort of like imagined a bunch of stuff that his sheltered mind found edgy. That's how this book reads to me.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Because one of the questions is, are they likable? Are they not likable? But another question is, does this guy think he's portraying cool people?
That's what I couldn't figure out either. Like, are they
Yeah.
supposed to be tragically hip? Are they? Ooh, see, there was a little musical reference.
Little Canadian
there.
content for you too.
But
kids.
are they supposed to be, like painfully hip? Are they supposed to be way out of touch and think they're cool?
right?
It never comes through. And I mean, they're 100% not cool. And I
Right.
think as a reader, that's very obvious.
Yeah.
But you can't tell what the book thinks about them. I think that is the best way to describe it.
Because you can't pin down when the book is, and they're supposed to be of their time and place, and you can't pin down the time and place. You don't know if it's 2005 with Blackberries and Interpol or 2015 with. Anyway, just doesn't.
I think before we get back to
2015
the
with Pussy Riot.
before we get back to the beginning here, the first 3 pages like we were talking about, I do want to say that I think my first note after the word edgy, and this really sums up a lot, which was finally a book about 30-somethings who say dude.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, a friend of mine, friend of the show, Hunter, pointed out very early, Christ, this isn't a book. This is a 160-plus page laundry list of cultural signifiers.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all that's going on here.
It's weird to say that this shares commonalities with Ernest Cline's work, but it does in a lot of ways. Kind of gets to my pandering statement earlier, and then a lot of it is a list of, hey, remember this, and kind of the entertainment value inherent in a lot of it is very much you need to know the references to think it's cool, and then that makes you feel like you're in the know.
And we've talked about this. There are ways to do that successfully because, number one, there are people who define themselves by the things they consume, and that is a valid subject for fiction, right? Nick Hornsby does that pretty well. As we talked about, Johnathan Lethem does that pretty well, right? This is trying to do that, but it just does it horribly. It gets, as we've said, the details wrong, and when you're trying to do that kind of work, the details are the most important part.
Agreed. Do we have any more listener comments about this? Let's do one more of those and then go to break.
This is my favorite, probably. This is from one of several Alexes who weighed in, who just said, quote, "I am one chapter in, and I hate everybody."
That's good. Let's go to break.
Let's go to break.
New York, you're safer, and you're wasting my time. Our records all show you were filthy but fine. But they shuttered your stores when you opened the doors to the cops who were bored once they'd run out of crime. New York, you're perfect.
Welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television, a podcast about bad books. We are talking about Condominium by Daniel Falatko. We've talked a lot about the book. It's time for some fun and some games.
Woo!
So let's go ahead and start off here with What Would You Do? What would they do? I know the names of my own things. Here's a song.
Sometimes the tensions are hard to divine, and others the clear as day. So tell me, what would they do?
All right, so What Would They Do presents hypothetical situations that we place characters from this book in and try to extrapolate what their actions would be.
And characters like these, we know them so well. I think this will be really easy and fun.
Well, that sounds good.
They're such real people.
And I have one prepared, so here we go. What I'm going to do, actually, is put you in the shoes of the author, one Daniel Falatko.
That's the meanest thing you have ever said to me.
I'm going to give you a couple of genres of music, and I want you to create a fake band name in the style of Daniel Falatko, creator of such luminary fake bands as Dormitory Overdose, Cyanide Breakfast, and those are the two I remember.
Right.
So, okay, let's start out here with a funk band.
Okay, his funk band would obviously be Interstellar Underbite.
Ooh, that sounds actually accurate as hell. How about black metal?
His black metal band would be Churchfire Rampage.
Man, these are good. Okay, so last one.
Shit, I am like this guy.
Let's do the last one here. How about a Zydeco group?
Oh, God. His Zydeco group would definitely be...
This one's unwinnable, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're right. But it would have to be something like Black and White Fish.
Oh, there you go.
So now I want to put it on you.
All right.
If he tried to invent a rapper, what would that guy go by?
Well, see, this is kind of unfair because there is a DJ who's named in this book, and he has the worst name ever. It's like DJ Joe Dollar Sign or something like that.
Yeah.
So, and also a car passes by at one point with "True to the Hood" on it, and he says that was the name of a rap group. So I guess sticking along those lines, I'm gonna say he's stuck firmly once again, 2004, 2005-ish. I would say it would be something like "Money to Hustler."
Yeah. I think that's definitely right, or just like gun friend or something.
Big Sex with 2 G's, and sex is all caps.
All right, we're going to hit pause for a second and see if these are available on Bandcamp.
Big Sex presents A Thug's Love, Volume 1. All right.
Well, that takes us pretty naturally into my What Is Your Fave?
Okay.
What is your fave? What is your fave? When you're presented with a list of options, what is your fave?
Because my question is, what is your favorite fake band name that Daniel Polacco actually came up with, or Daniel Polacco actually came up with? So they go like this: Cyanide Breakfast, Dormitory Overdose, Alligator Uprising, The International, Gathering of Hens, Deerfoot, Gathering of Wolves, Foxes, Horses, or Snakes.
Deerfoot.
Deerfoot, yeah.
Very obviously, I think, supposed to be a deer hoof kind of
Sick
parody,
burn,
but
yeah.
like Sick Burn. But I just like the idea of a band named Deerfoot. That's actually a good name.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's not bad. It'd be better if it were DEAR and not DEER.
Deerfoot.
Deerfoot.
You got some explaining to do, Foot. How about you?
I hated them all enormously, but at the end of the day, I think Alligator Uprising was the most ridiculous and therefore the least bad.
Did you get Vampire Weekend vibes from their description of the band?
Oh, that's a good call. Not from that band, no. I thought they were very, very Strokes-ish.
I guess so, yeah. They did describe him as having an afro, but I guess that could easily apply to a Casablancas as well as to an Ezra Koenig. So.
I think that's right, but I think you're right that that's where the names came from, because the first three all had the same metrical pattern.
Yeah,
right. It was always like ba-da-da-ba-ba-ba-da-da-ba-ba. So
yeah,
it was definitely a Vampire Weekend.
Yeah,
that he was going for there. I'm not sorry I didn't get that.
All right, awesome. Let's do another segment called Russian Roulette.
Woo!
Russian roulette, Russian roulette, Russian roulette, not actually Russian.
I fucking love that song. That's my favorite song for the podcast that I've made. It's so aggressive.
It is. And also committed to accuracy.
It's true. Not actually Russian. So Russian Roulette, we're going to flip through this book at random till the other person calls us to stop, and then we're going to read a section randomly from whatever page we're on. So would you like to flip first, or would you like me to flip first?
You call it.
Let me read first. So I'm flipping now.
Okay. You're still flipping. Keep on flipping, and now stop.
Here we go. Her senses weren't together enough to deal with that nightmare of a hallway, the wallpaper radiating its obscene shade of beige, more beige coming at her from the carpet, low-slung lights intimately pulsating, a scene that swims before your eyes even after 8 hours of sleep, let alone the 2 she had salvaged that morning. She steadied herself with a hand on the wall. Is this what it felt like to murder someone? The need for escape? For forward movement? A distinct lack of remorse? She had murdered her own kitchen, and she didn't care.
Damn.
It should be mentioned that the inciting incident of this paragraph is that she made a huge mess with coffee. That's how this book works. Yep. Like, little things like that happen, and then the characters talk about it like they've just committed a horrible crime.
And we will be hearing more about that horrible crime in my dramatic reading, he foreshadowed.
Awesome. All right, are you ready to flip?
I'm ready to flip.
To begin flippage.
I'm flipping.
Stop.
With this, she brightened. I'll hang up the rest of that shit, too. We'll be all set. Did I tell you my parents are coming in 2 weeks to check out our place? At this, he gulped, nearly choking on the last bite of French toast, but regained composure quickly. cool. You're just saying that. She kicked his leg playfully underneath the table. Purchasing a condo together is a big move, you know. They probably think we're finally getting hitched. We will once you give in and just do City Hall with me. Shaking her head, she purred, classy, intimate gathering, with Waiting on a Friend as the theme song. So you need to know two things about this scene. One, this is the morning they call in sick to work because they've done heroin the night before and are having kind of a rough morning together. One, Waiting on a Friend is a song about hanging out on the corner waiting for your dealer to show up. And neither of them seem to know that. Number two, there's this cheeky moment at the very end of the scene where the waitress winks at him and is like, "Don't worry, guys. Heroin makes me sick, too. Have a good day."
It should be mentioned the casuality that heroin use is described in this book. And I mean, I'm by no means, a saint, but like by the same token, I really feel like I've associated with quite a few musicians in the past and, like definitely had my party years in school and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know anybody who is as open about their occasional heroin use as these people. Like they really just like kind of flaunt it and everyone's like, hey, yeah, that's totally okay and normal. And I feel like no one's really ever worried about them.
Well, that's New York, baby. Number one, I think that's definitely true. And it's explicitly, Sarah says this to her co-workers. The thing that she likes best about Charles is that he has a dark side as exemplified by the fact that he does heroin. And number two, it's all cool, man, because they only snort it. So it's actually super cash.
Yeah, it's kind of an uncomfortable balancing act that happens there that I wasn't super fond of. To be fair, there's a casuality about that aspect of the plot that I found really off-putting.
Fair enough.
Dramatic readings.
Oh, let's do it.
Dramatic readings. We're gonna make it sound important. Dramatic readings. Yeah, I got some words for you.
All right, Dramatic Readings is excerpts from this book presented to you in a dramatic format. Collision, how about you going first?
I would love to go first.
Do it.
Do you have any idea what you've done to our kitchen? He began pacing the small strip that separated the living room from the balcony. One of the curtains caught on his arm, threatening to entangle him, and he pulled it down along with the rod he had erected just days before. The floors! The counters! The cherry wood drawers! Oh, dear God, the cherry wood! We need to get it together. You need to get it together. Wandering the halls at night like some goddamn ghost, screaming, living on some slab of concrete like a flood survivor. Oh dear God, the kitchen. This is supposed to be a good time, baby. We've bought this place. Let's get with it here. This was our dream. Oh dear God, the kitchen.
Once again, this is how this book is written. Very small things lead to these tremendous chapter-long outbursts of emotions. So I'm going to talk about, read a segment here that's about the two of them going to an indie rock concert and describing their surroundings. Once again, this should place you right firmly in the year 2005. But it should also give you a clue of just how edgy and progressive and with it and youthful our author is. So let's begin. Weed smoke choked the air. Camel lights. Two men made out against the chain-link fence lined with plywood, oh my gosh, that sectioned off the concert area. As usual, Charles began heading off in the wrong direction. Hey, retard. I bet you can see everything from the top of the hill. Jesus Christ, really? Really? Is that why all those kids are up there? I would imagine so. They ascended. The song had ended. A roar from the crowd across the fence. Lithe boys in plaid and beards strained to watch, their heads bobbing as the band struck up a new song that sounded like if Brian Wilson had been born in Manchester. She wondered what Charles would look like with a beard. A full beard. Not the weekend stubble or the carefully trimmed vacation growth he occasionally experimented with, but a defiant, brooding nest. He would most likely look very handsome, rustic, like the boys now parting for them to take in their free view of the stage. How nice of them, she thought. Peace and love have not perished. These waterfront concerts look like Down and Out in Paris and London. The cynic in practice, bringing another nice moment to its knees. This suspicion people share for these kids, the lines of vintage bicycles and 80s rock t-shirts, what would people rather be around? Stockbrokers? Suburbanites? What exactly is the problem? If people who enjoy art and music and dressed with an eye turned away from Gaps and Banana Republics pose some sort of threat to the fabric, then let the house come crashing down. Ladies and gentlemen, gentrification has never been more misunderstood.
Also, this definitely places this book squarely before the lumberjack movement, which was, 2008? So
yeah, 8 to 10, I would say. Around the time the other Brian Wilson was in the news. That's kind of...
Yeah.
That was when beards had their heyday, for sure.
Baseball interlude.
Yep. Oh, shit. That's not good. Spilling beer. I think I've had enough talking about this book. How about you?
Fuck yeah.
Let's go to break. We're going to come back, do some recommendations and letters. Thank you.
The afternoon, you're out on the stone and grass, and I'm sleeping on the balcony after class. In the afternoon, you're out on the stone and grass, and I'm sleeping on the balcony after class.
All right, welcome back to I Don't Even Own a Television. It's a podcast about bad books, and we've been talking about Condominium by Daniel Falatko. Raising and lowering my voice.
It's a very bad book.
It is. This book is so bad that I've resorted to phonetic games to entertain myself. But the light at the end of the tunnel is here. We're done. Let's recommend some stuff that doesn't suck.
Let's do it.
How about if you go first?
I'd love to. What I would like to recommend is a somewhat similar book in that it's kind of a time and place, zeitgeisty kind of book. The difference is that the characters actually are interesting and well described. They seem both real, like individual people, and somehow representative of something somewhat larger. And the book ends with, instead of a rich kid drug orgy, ends with an orgy of anti-cop violence. So I like that.
That's better.
Exactly. And that is a book called Godspeed by Lynn Breedlove, who San Francisco types and LGBTQI types may remember as the lead singer of Tribe 8.
Oh, okay, cool. I remember Tribe 8. I did not know their names, but they were awesome.
Yeah. They were one of the pioneering queercore bands, and Lynn Breedlove was very well known for wearing a strap-on on stage and then either cutting it off with a knife or a chainsaw or making some boy in the audience go down on it. And the book is very much of that time and place. It's a very early 2000s SF bike messenger, later goes to New York and lives in a squat kind of scene. And it's not a perfect book. It's got its flaws, but it's incredibly worth reading and interesting and rewarding to get through.
Speaking of not perfect by any means, but still good, I'm going to recommend Chronic City by Johnathan Lethem, who we've kind of alluded to throughout the podcast. This book definitely shares a lot of similarities with Lethem's work. I think there's an obvious influence of Lethem on this book in the fact that the story is remarkably similar to Chronic City. But Chronic City is actually an entertaining read. It's kind of similar in subject matter. You're talking about people in their 40s who are professionals but have a counterculture past that, don't want to give up on their weed smoking and carousing and having a good time. And so in a lot of ways it is the same kind of middle class white angst book that this is, but it's presented in a much more entertaining way, and it's Lethem. So if you're unfamiliar, he writes in a really fun, playful way to read. It's the opposite of the slog that is this book. So yeah, Chronic City, I would check it out. It's the name means two things at once.
Holy shit!
Yeah, it's about weed. Just a heads up for people who are in the know.
Heads up?
That's true. Yeah.
For the heads in the audience?
Look, I'll just be blunt. Sorry.
Don't get me bong, but
what we're actually
this
doing
joint
right
is
now.
well worthwhile.
What we're actually doing right now is pitching names of our new dispensary. So stay tuned for more details on that. You want to do some letters?
I want to do 2 letters.
All right.
The first is a letter in 2 parts from Shauna, no last name. Hey guys, No matter how many times you say, don't read this, my first response when I listen to these episodes is, haha, I need to read this. And then it gets even more relatable to at least me, although I think Jay will deny this. Much in the same way that watching terrible tattoo reality shows makes me want to get tattoos. I'm a little concerned for my survival instinct. I want to take a quick pause to note I was legitimately upset last Tuesday when I got home and realized I had missed the big finale of Ink Masters. I've been watching it all season long and I couldn't see who won.
Well, regular listeners know that I love professional wrestling, and it turns out the WWE Network has a wrestling-based tattoo reality show.
What?
It's called WWE Inc. It's called WWE Inc., I think, and it's literally just a reality show about wrestlers getting tattoos.
Okay, so that's the end of this podcast because we apparently have to go watch the WWE Network for a couple hours. Have a great night, guys.
Will Batista cry? Tune in tonight to find out.
Wow.
All right.
Okay, back to the letter for a second. This is one of my favorite podcasts. I love the range of bad you cover. I love the games. I love when you laugh so hard you can't finish a sentence. And I love how socially conscious you are. Anyone who tries to say you need to be offensive / not PC to be funny needs to listen to your show. I only read that because that was such a nice paragraph. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And we appreciate the kind words, and thank you for listening, and we will hopefully continue to not be idiots.
Definitely. I tried writing a list of tags for the website, but I quickly realized I'm not very funny with or without tasteless jokes. I will, however, plead that you add the tag /derail. Can't wait for the next episode. Letter ends there. And then a few hours later, the following came in. Shit. I meant rush derail. See? Not funny. I just loved that so much because I was like, I don't know, /derail. That kind of makes sense. We talk about / a lot, but then
we haven't talked about rush in a long time.
It's true.
Now's a good time. Do you like moving? Pardon me. Are you more into power windows or hold your fire?
Oof. You know, to be really honest, Hold Your Fire was my first Rush record in 1987. I don't remember it very well, and I'm really just a fly-by-night man.
Gotcha.
What about you?
I love power windows. I love the synthesizer era of Rush. I feel like it's much maligned by rock purists, but I think that they were kind of at their best at times in their synthesizer period because they were putting their instrumental virtuosity behind them, focusing more on the core of strong songwriting.
Right, so you're closer to the heart type,
yes.
Spirit of radio type moments.
See, those are still pretty virtuosic. I'm talking about more like, let's say, like Manhattan Project or Marathon.
2 songs I do not know.
Yeah, well, check them out. Listeners, check them out. Really good Rush stuff that somehow sounds like Tears for Fears.
Before we get completely off the Rush train, I would like to note, I've listened to 2112 twice recently. It at no point actually rocks. That record blows.
It kind of like lurches in a complicated fashion, but it never rocks. Right. All right, so tune in to our show every week.
Rush Talk.
Every other week for talk about books and possibly Rush if you're lucky.
Thank you for spurring that Rush derail, Sean, I know last name. Okay, let's move on to our last letter. This one is from Noodles, no last name, my girlfriend, who wrote the following. Hi, Jay and Collision's actual name. I told Collision's actual name most of this already, but he said I should write to you guys because mail is fun. And mail is fun, and work is awful. So here's my email. I just listened to a couple recent episodes this week, and Jay, I was going to tell Collision's real name, to tell you that I'm really sad I missed your Alex Chilton karaoke in Minneapolis because I love that song, and your performance sounds magical.
It was.
But then I got to the point where you make fun of people who point out that the party in Ignition really was catered, and I became angry with you. All caps. Ignition is a really good song, but the fact that the party truly was catered, not as if it was catered, is an important and salient point.
Okay, so there's a story here. And I'm going to say that the first person I ever heard point that out about the party being catered is my wife, Senta. And so then after that, and obviously this is not a case of joke infringement because, you know, this is a common thing that lots of people have arrived at.
Parallel evolution.
But we started seeing it on the internet everywhere. And for some reason it grew in my mind just to become like, this is the most tired joke because it also has this association in my mind of like, well, my wife made that up first.
And then all you guys are completely biting her.
Exactly,
Right.
which
makes
totally
sense.
is not true, but that's the context that exists within my mind. So there is a story for me being so cranky about that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Setting aside your wrongness about that, the music is always great on the show, and I particularly liked the Shadow Moon choices, and not only because Collision's real name recently introduced me to the splendor that is Holy Diver.
Oh, yes.
And I want to tell that story. So it was, we had a long weekend, so we did a bunch of long bike rides, and I happened to tell her that when I go on a long bike ride, I tend to get songs weirdly stuck in my head, and they tend to be mashups of loops. So I spent like 20 miles on a bicycle with this Holy Diver Rainbow in the Dark mashup going through my head. And I tried to tell her about it, and it didn't make sense, and I realized she didn't know who Dio was. So I took her home and I played her some Dio, and I thought she was going to think it was the most ridiculous bad thing ever. And about 2 minutes in, she looked up and she's like, this is really making me have feelings. Feelings I never knew I could have.
Well, Dio will do that for
Dio
sure.
will do that. So I really liked that moment.
No, it's a great letter. Thank you for writing in.
Yep.
Also, yeah, Dio fucking rules. I love Holy Diver. I'm actually surprised because I thought you were going to say when you were going on a long bike ride through the woods, it looked like the Holy Diver video, most of which involves Dio running through the woods with a big fake sword.
Very, very large, very, very thick sword. It's delightful. Actually, let's do a supplementary recommendation.
Yeah.
Dio, particularly the videos when he was a big deal.
Yeah, the video for Holy Diver starts out with a good 45 seconds of just plot before the music begins.
Yep.
And it's all Dio in a robe carrying a giant sword stomping through what is obviously just like a broken down building in the middle of a forest, but is supposed to kind of look like a castle.
Yeah, and this was sort of pre-professionalism in the video era. I'm not even convinced they were playing the song behind him because the lip syncing is pretty off.
It's bad. It's bad.
But it's delightful and it's charming. And if you have anything bad to say about Dio, please write some other podcast about it because we don't want to hear it.
A brief aside is that a long time ago, like probably almost 10 years ago now, I made a rap song with the chorus, the lyrics I just stole from Holy Diver. That's it. Like the rest of it was just a normal rap song.
Right.
But like I named the song Holy Diver and I put that song on YouTube along with some other stuff. And then about 10 days later, Ronnie James Dio passed away.
Oh.
Which was something that I didn't even think about it in relation to my song, but immediately the song, I guess, started popping up in people's searches when they'd search for Dio Holy Diver. And I got so many angry comments from 40-year-old dads that were like, Ronnie James Dio wouldn't appreciate this rap bullshit. So, yep, that's my Dio story.
That's brutal. And I
Yeah.
bet actually Ronnie James Dio had some rap records he fucking loved. I almost guarantee he did.
Yeah.
Like I'm pretty sure like occasionally on the tour bus he was like, it's Public Enemy time.
At the very least, he liked Anthrax's I'm the Man. So
That's the meanest thing you've ever said about Ronnie James Dio.
I'm the man.
let's clear the palate.
I'm bad.
If you thank you for writing in. If you want to write in, it's I don't even own a television at gmail.com. We're also at IDEO TV Pod on both Facebook and Twitter. That's what you put in after the slash. We had a lot of fun as an experiment reading the book along with you guys this time around. So thank you to everybody who took part in that, from about 8 people named Alex to Jeremy, who also was instrumental in suggesting the book, to Hunter, everybody else. Couldn't have been more fun.
Yes, thank you, listeners. I don't even own a television.com is our website. Episodes go up there every other week, every other Wednesday, so keep your eyes out.
Why don't you review us on your favorite podcast provider of choice? That would really make us happy and help us out a little bit. So that would be awesome.
That's true. We're no longer new, but we can still be noteworthy. Wink,
Exactly.
wink. So
Yeah.
give us that 5 stars. So thanks for listening, and until next time, keep reading crap.
Don't let money change ya.
a story